Hey everybody, happy holidays. Welcome to the top games of the year for me for 2015. I'll be posting several end of year videos this week, so definitely take a look at them. So I am going to give away my favorite game of the year, so hang around and stick around for that. The way that you can get that is just comment on the video here on YouTube, and then I will pick out a random person and they will get a copy of my favorite game of the year. So couple of things here. I'm not doing a top 10. I did that last year. I hadn't done it in the past. It's not going to fit this year because I had a lot of strong entries that I wanted to include, and then I went across and sort of figured out what sort of genres or categories they might fit in, and that's basically 3 categories, and I did a top 7 in each of those. And those categories in order will be Euro games, Ameritrash games, and then social games. So the Euro games is a little bit wonky, maybe depending on your opinion of what that word means, but I'll talk about that more in a minute. I just wanted to mention a couple of honorable mentions because I'm going to leave out some good games because they didn't fit in this category, but otherwise this video game review thing would be like an hour long. So a couple honorable mentions: Imperial Assault, which missed my list last year because I didn't get it till like Christmas, and then played it, and we're supposed to finish up our campaign. It's been a year, but we had several people leave and move. We're going to finish that up here in the next couple of weeks, and then hopefully jump into Hoth. And I love the game, it's awesome, but it's kind of a 2014 release. So I knew I would get a bunch of flack about that. But it would be high up on my Ameritrash list. I don't know exactly where. Probably number 1 or 2. Okay, there you go. The last 2 sort of honorable mentions are the Versus System and Ashes. Now they didn't fit into these 3 categories. Maybe Ameritrash, but they're basically card games or LCG style games. Really enjoying both of those. I think I like Versus a little bit more than Ashes, but kind of need the expansions to come out for both of those for me to really make up my mind. I've seen some previews of the new Versus expansion stuff. It looks fantastic, so I'm extra excited about that, which is why it just gets a little bit of a bump for me above Ashes. I haven't seen a lot of leaks or previews for Ashes, but it looks really cool. I'm holding on to both of them. I like them because they're sort of a slower stage, kind of gentle release LCG where you don't have new packs coming out left and right. I did also hold on to the Game of Thrones 2nd edition. I want to give that a few more goes as well, but definitely Versus and Ashes for me would be my sort of upper echelon card games there. Really close, by the way. So let's go through the Euros. These are going to be top 7 Euros, then I'll do top 7 Ameritrash and top 7 social games. So number 7 from the Euros is The King is Dead. This is a small 30-minute Euro game that actually works well at lunch, and it's very, very different. It's an area control game that works very interesting at 3 and 4 players. 2 players you could kind of take or leave, but the 3-player game is fantastic. There's not really a 3-player game experience quite like this one. It's very heavy and crunchy. There's a lot of sort of thought and a lot of sort of strategic approach. You kind of think several turns down the road. And the 4-player game has the same elements, but it's sort of like playing Tichu or a team-based ladder climbing trick-taking game where you sort of have a collective score and then you're trying to sort of influence these different factions but without speaking, and just through the card play and trying to give hints sort of with the cards that you may or may not be playing. Very tight, crunchy, thinky game, but it only plays in about 30 minutes. We loved it at lunch, played it all the time. Very cool game. The number 6 game is Above and Below. This is from Ryan Lockout at Red Raven Games. This is very interesting. It is a Euro game, sort of a nice traditional kind of Euro vibe, but then add on Tales of the Arabian Nights storybook reading, which has a direct impact on your gameplay. So the idea of the game is you've all been sort of expelled or exiled from your previous homeland. You're settling a new area. There's an above ground and a below ground, hence above and below. And when you go and explore below, you're going to be sort of excavating caverns in a way and then having different encounters, and those encounters are what come out of the storybook. Fantastic. Lovely game is the word I can use because the art and everything is so sort of whimsical but also very well integrated, and it makes a lot of sense, and you have a lot of sort of like moral choice as well with some of those encounters. And then on top of that, you sort of a set collecting kind of thing. You're building up different buildings to give special abilities and victory points. Very tightly well done and easily expandable. I know he's working on other storybooks and all kinds of other things like that to go with the game. Definitely take a look at this one. So the number 5 one is The Gallerist. This is a big, heavy monster of a game from Vital Lacerda, who I've reviewed, all of his games so far. I don't know if this is my favorite one. It might be my favorite game of his. I have a hard time. I need to go back and play CO2 again, just to kind of compare and contrast, since The Gallerist is fresh in my head. They're both very, very different. I think these are the two most different of his games. Venus and Kanban kind of feel like a lot of other heavy modern Euros, but they got a little Vital twist on it. The Gallerist and CO2 feel like another step, another world apart. The production values on The Gallerist are out of this world. And it's a very interesting theme, too, of how you manage people visiting your gallery. If you don't know the game, that it's a theme of you have an art gallery and you're buying and selling art. You're also trying to attract collectors versus investors and all kinds of different types of visitors. Very thematic and also heavy and crunchy. Definitely take a look at this if you haven't already and you like heavy Euros. The number 4 is Argent the Consortium. This is really sort of leaps and bounds different than a lot of Euros. It's sort of a hybrid in a way, because it's a Ameritrash Euro, because there's a lot of cool special abilities and cards and spells and things that you can get to play. But it definitely comes down, for me, a little bit more on the Euro side, whereas a game that I have on my Ameritrash list comes down a little bit more on the Ameritrash side. But this one, to me, I feel like straddles the fence, but comes down a little bit Euro for me. And it's really crazy because you don't really know what the victory condition is going to be. You've got to sort of deduce that and figure that out by what the other players are doing, and then by slowly revealing these hidden agendas. So each player is trying to get votes to be the head of this magical Harry Potter-like school. It's not like Harry Potter, but that's the closest thing I can think of. And it's just great because you have that element of kind of like worker placement, but also workers with different magic and special abilities. And then that whole deduction element of if you have the most gold coins at the end of the game, at the end of the game, you get, my votes. And if you have the most green spells, you get this other person's votes. And combine all that with this crazy wild powers that you can get that everybody has access to, mind you, to augment all of that worker placement stuff. It's beautiful, and the game looks beautiful. It's got this kind of anime style thing, sort of, that's very different and interesting for a Euro style game. Really have enjoyed this. The group has really, really enjoyed it as well. So that was number 4, Argent the Consortium. And number 3 is Automobiles. This is from AEG. Little fudge here because it's not quite out yet, but there were a lot of copies that were floating around. I feel like I want to give this mention because we've really had a blast playing this game. The family has really enjoyed it, and it has so much packed into the game. And this is one of those where I talked about the Euro category kind of being a little bit wonky, because Euro is not really a great word ever anymore, because the classifications are just sort of avoid being captured. And this has some Euro-y elements. I mean, deck building, I guess that's a Euro element. Dominion was a Euro, I guess. And it has a lot of replay in the box, though, because you have this cube building thing where you have bags and you pull out cubes of different colors that match these cards, and they will do different effects to move your cars around the racetrack. And there's 2 racetracks in the game. And so the maneuverability and sort of where you want to drive on the racetrack is going to dictate what you're doing. The kind of loadout or the display of cards that you have. So you think of in Dominion, you shuffle up the cards and you put out a display of cards to buy that game. This has that same element where you've got to really figure out how much sort of wear and tear you're going to generate on your car through the game, and which cards you're going to buy to sort of augment that. And at what point you're going to kind of shift tactics also, because you can sort of burn cubes out of your bag, and you might try to just push and race to the end of it as you get towards the end of the game. And your thoughts are going to change based on how many laps you want to play the game for, because you can play I think up to 7 laps, or you can just do a quick 3-lap race and all kinds of cool stuff. So there's a lot of replayability here that hits on those sort of like those familiar notes of deck building, but it's very different and it's a little bit more interactive, it feels like, because you have to really think about where the cars are and on the track and what the shape of the track and everything looks like, especially as you add more players to the game. So really had a lot of fun with this. Very surprised that I like this. But I'm going to call it 2015 release because we've been playing about a month now. So, but you got to look out for it probably coming next month in January. So number 2 now is Food Chain Magnate. This is another recent edition, but really have quite fallen in love with this game in a lot of ways. It's from Splotter Spellen, and it's a very open-ended business Euro, to be sort of glib about it. Very cool theme, a very quirky look and feel to it, of sort of a 1950s style board game, but also it evokes a 1950s style theme of running a fast food chain. And you have this real cool, like, it's not pick up and deliver, but it's sort of like you create these little markets and advertising spaces around the board to sort of suck business away from the other players. And a lot of it has to do with the style of advertising that you put up, also the proximity of the advertising to different neighborhoods, what you're actually advertising, if it's even in demand, or that's how you're actually creating demand, but if you're able to actually, supply the demand of what's being advertised. And a real kind of fight for turf in a lot of ways, and then also fighting for getting in at the right time and sort of undercutting the prices of other players and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's a very open-ended kind of a deck building idea, but you end up buying and acquiring these different employees and adding them to this ever-growing giant hand of employees, and then building them out into a pyramid, and then each turn you kind of activate them and they kind of do different things based on who you put down there and everything. So very, very different, like all Splotter games are, but also very open-ended, very cutthroat, and you can really, if you're good at the game, just short circuit it for everybody, which I like. I like that in a game, because a lot of times you sort of cruise along with these Euros and everybody's kind of doing okay, and then at the end of the game you forgot you lost by 30 points and you weren't really doing that good. In this game, you're going to know kind of quick at a certain point in the game if you weren't doing very good, or the game could be very tight. And speaking of tight, it works well as a 2-player game and all the player counts. But it's got that brutality to it, which I do enjoy from time to time. Finally, the number 1 game of my Euro category, and this is, the Euro category is kind of my strategy category. This is where the game and the mechanics are higher prevalence for me than, for example, my Ameritrash side. Even though I think all of the Ameritrash games I have on here, which I'm going to talk about next, have great mechanics and are very engaging from the gameplay perspective. To me, this category is forefront and above the mechanics first. And I just get into winning the game. Whereas a lot of my Ameritrash games, I don't care as much if I win. I still try to win. Of course, you want to try to win. That's the whole point. This one is like, I'm trying to win these. I'm trying to be clever and efficient with what I'm doing. So, number 1 is Roll for the Galaxy. This game is awesome. I love the new expansion which just came out. And this is why I kind of preface this with this whole idea of mechanics, because once you kind of roll the dice in this, you roll these dice to sort of get more dice and get more planets and settlements to get more special abilities and more dice, and really kind of zap the power out each round as efficiently as possible to generate money and victory points and to sort of snowball your way to victory. It doesn't have a snowball runaway leader thing, I don't think, at all, but that's what it feels like. You're trying to just eke out all the efficiencies you can with this cool dice manipulation, and it really just takes dice manipulation into such a great direction for me, where I feel like it's almost like what I wanted Warriors to be, which is kind of a weird thing, but I wanted to have this thing where I was able to get new dice. You still have that random element, which is interesting because at each turn you get new possibilities to play with. But this one there's a lot more manipulation and things that you can do, where it reminds me more of some of the more dicey Euros that have come out, like Burgundy, and I don't know, I'm spacing out on a bunch of them, but it has that whole lever pulling manipulation aspects going on, combos, digging for the cool developments and planets, and it's just really fun. And it plays really quickly. I mean, I've played this from 2 to 5 all the way across, and I'll play with any player count. It works well across all of them. The only rule for 2 players is you just roll simply a 1 white die each turn, and then it kind of like sort of AI picks a roll for you, and that's it. But it's great across all player counts, and it plays quick because it's just everybody's taking their turns simultaneously, and you can get a 5-player game done in like 45 minutes or so after everybody's played it. It looks gorgeous too, and it's one of those kind of intangible things with a lot of these Euros, where it's just fun to get in there and manipulate and sort of search out that most efficient, best strategy for that given game. And this really excels at that, and then condenses all of it down, like I said, into a reasonable playing time. Okay, that was the Euros. Now we're going to do Ameritrash. We're going to do number 7, Ameritrash. And the number 7 is Warhammer Quest from Fantasy Flight, new release. Awesome game, very fun, very evocative of the Warhammer sort of fantasy universe, the brutality of that, and just a super fun, quick, easy to play, but also very difficult to win cooperative card game. And it feels like a dungeon crawl when you're playing the game. At least it does to me. It feels very much like I'm going into the dungeon, I'm running into a wall of orcs or maybe a spider, randomly sort of generated. It kind of has a roguelike feel in that way, where you're going back into this dungeon you've been at 100 times and dealing with new situations in new ways, and trying to sort of different tactics with the different characters you might have. You might have a bright wizard or a warrior priest or so on. And it's just very fun, and the dice rolling in this game is very, very interesting in terms of like how you activate your abilities. So you activate your abilities, and you might get sort of like a response or a counter attack or a counter response, because you might be trying to heal your buddy across the way, and the orc is next to you taking a swing as you're doing that. And that kind of visceral, sort of real-time-ish kind of aspect is very engaging and interesting. And all the special abilities and the different abilities of the monsters and all that kind of stuff feel very thematic. They make sense in this world, which is what Fantasy Flight does so well at. So definitely take a look at this. Now, number 6 is XCOM. And I think a lot of people have been disappointed by this game, which kind of surprises me, because I think the majority of people in my group have really enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed it. It took a little bit of getting used to like this game. The app is very interesting, and it kind of feels like Pandemic, like on fire. It kind of has this whole thing where you're going around to different parts of the globe, kind of putting out fires and fighting back either aliens invading your base or UFOs landing in different regions, and then trying to sort of accomplish different goals or missions and managing your resources effectively. But it's just super engaging, and after a while, after you kind of get sort of the basic game, the standard game in, you're going to get good at it, and then you can kind of ratchet it up or try different missions. And it's very interesting to see sort of the AI sort of subtly unravel itself based on what's going on with the cards and reacting to what you're doing. And I really hope that this sold well, honestly, because I'd like to see an expansion. I'd like to see more games like this. I'd like to see this sort of pushed, because the AI or the app in this case, it works as a timer, which is fine. But it's a little bit of a glorified timer in that regard. But having it sort of react to you smartly and sort of a little bit more logically is the most interesting part of it. And kind of learning about that and dealing with that. And that definitely, to me, replaces this whole idea of a deck of cards, where you just kind of flip up an event. You're like, oh, well, we got screwed by that because, we drew 3 reds in a row or whatever it is. So this is a little bit more interesting in that case, where you feel like you're dealing with sort of a smarter opponent a little bit, but still kind of playing like kind of Pandemic, where you're just kind of putting out fires and trying to efficiently manage what your resources are doing. Really fun game, and I do really enjoy the XCOM universe as well. So I'll definitely give this one a look, and if you've heard mixed reviews, maybe try before you buy, but this is one you got to give it a few plays. It took me, I think, 3 or 4 plays to really get into it and start to really appreciate this one. Number 5 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, number 5 is Tail Feathers. This is a new, addition to the list because I've just recently played it. Really had a great time with this one. I talked in detail about the review. The review came out like a week or 2 ago. really evokes a lot for me of what I've kind of wanted to get out of a game like X-Wing or Attack Wing, and what I've been missing, frankly, since I was a kid and played a game called Dragonlance, which you should not play. It's a horrible game, but it's also a very fun game. It's just not very good mechanically. This, to me, replaces for me a little bit of my heart and soul with that game in terms of various types of combat, miniature combat, and a nice cool game that has a lot of cool scenarios and stuff to get you in and get you playing and get you fighting and flying around and doing cool combat maneuvers and all that kind of cool stuff. You really got to take a look at this game. Production value is off the scale. Just very easy to play rule set that you can kind of configure so you can play with kids and then kind of throw in some of the advanced rules to play, kind of a more meaty game. Go take a look at the review for that one. It's an excellent game. Highly recommend it for me. Number 4 here in the Ameritrash category is Space Cadets Away Missions. Actually surprised that I've enjoyed this one as much as I have. It kind of straddles the line between like dungeon crawl and just sort of a basic pure co-op, which fits perfectly for me. Now, one of my favorite games of all time is Defenders of the Realms. And that's kind of like, it takes a lot of the mechanics from Pandemic, but it also has that adventure vibe in it. And this Away Missions has that adventure feel. It feels very unique in terms of how, like, you go and activate all the monsters and how they attack you, and then what you can do in terms of like what you're trying to get to help you and enhance you in terms of there's the way that the thralls come out, which I won't explain, but there's these different sort of mind controlled people that you get at and other types of items that you try to go and get at, to go and get items to help you get more powerful within a given scenario, and then go on and complete that objective to finish out the scenario, which the game comes with like 20 different scenarios, and you can play them as a campaign and just play them straight through. But the way the game evolves, it feels like you're playing kind of the same game every time, but I want to stop there because it doesn't feel samey. But it has that familiarity where you're like, okay, I know the basics, what I need to do. Every time I play this game, I need to go here and get these guys, and then hopefully get some cool items and activate them, and then manipulate the sort of maneuverability of the different creatures that might show up, and then get to the final objective. And it's very fun. It has a great sort of core system that's easy to learn, and then you sort of just gussy it up and just paint layers and layers and layers of all this theme on it across the different scenarios. It's just like a pure fun game, and that's just, you can see kind of the break here between like the Euros and this style stuff. It's that break between, like, I'm not necessarily worried about the efficiency, but there's still the meaty core of a game here in Space Cadets Away Missions, but it's more about the experience of it, and it being more of a fun experience, and laughing at, like, we're surrounded by these alien brains that are just destroying us with their debuff, or there's like a mob of these slow slugs that are slowly coming, and we're like, oh, we feel like we're okay. Oh no, they're right on top of us, and they do a lot of damage, So this is a really fun game, and it's just super fun and evocative of that sense. Number 3 is Forbidden Stars. This game is awesome. I've had a chance to play this now 5 times this year, and that's it. But it's kind of a long game, and it works great at all the player counts, 2, 3, and 4. If I had a recommendation, I'd probably say 4 is the best, but I would still play it 2 and 3 for sure. It's kind of like your uber glorified dudes on the map or dudes in space, sort of territory control, conquest, kind of like Risk, but blown out and just filled up with all kinds of fun special abilities, ways to tinker with your empire, because it's kind of like a deck building thing where you can add cards to your combat deck, different units, but it just does so many things smartly in terms of kind of fixing all the problems with this style of game. I mean, you have the different types of armies you can deploy, but it's not just a strict territory and area control game. Now, that can be very important at the end of the game, especially if it's like a close game. But you kind of go out and you get these sort of different objectives that are out on the map that are keys to your winning, and they're just little areas you have to control at different points in the game to try to get this little objective token. But then the dynamics of the players become so important in that. and, dealing with keeping somebody sort of on the rails and not, running away with it, and the tinkering of everything involved with it. It's just a super fun, interesting game from start to finish. And there's just a lot of, this is one that kind of breaks it down, because this is one where I get really into the mechanics of it, but I also get into the theme and the narrative and all that kind of stuff too. This one really straddles and hits a lot of me, a lot of my criteria that I look for in a game. Now it's a little long. You're definitely looking at like a 4-hour game here, just about every time, I would say, except for probably a 2-player game. But it's just, you kind of add in that third and fourth player, it's just going to add a little extra time, because there's a lot to kind of take in and think about. It's not complex at all, but you just have to be very careful about what you do. And this is a game that I think with some expansions could probably go up my top 100 kind of thing. Because I think about this game, I haven't played Eclipse since I've played this game, for example, and I really, really enjoy Eclipse. It doesn't have as much to it as Eclipse, but the combat is way more interesting than Eclipse. So Eclipse is a different game. It's a 4X, but if you like Eclipse or sort of, I guess Twilight Imperium, I would look at this game as sort of like, it just gives you that visceral, lay it down, let's start fighting kind of feel that those games they have, but they also have a lot of extra to it. So if you don't really feel like that extra stuff, you just want to get in there and slam it and, think strategically and tactically, this is your one. Number 2 Ameritrash game is maybe a surprise to some people, but maybe not to others. It's Star Wars Risk. Speaking of Risk, this is not a Risk game. It's more like Queen's Gambit, if you've not heard of it. It is based on the last 30 minutes of Return of the Jedi. So you have different theaters that you are fighting in, and you are controlling Luke versus Darth Vader, and the assault on the Endor shield station to take out the shields, to reveal the Death Star, and then the whole space combat around the Death Star. And the object, of course, is to either wipe out all the rebel ships, or if you're the rebels, wipe out the Death Star. It's really super fun. And there's a couple things I like it. First of all, it's Return of the Jedi, so that's really neat. I like Star Wars. Second, it plays in like half hour. And it plays super quick and it's super fun. And most of the time, it goes down to the wire. Now, you have to go and look on Board Game Geek for, there's a BGG rules clarification thread on Board Game Geek for this game. You've got to play with the 7 rules that clarify it. It really goes ways to balancing the game in favor of the rebels. I'm confused in my head. I can't remember which was unbalanced before. I'm having a brain fart. But it was really swingy towards, the rebels always won. That was the thing. Sorry. Just a little mind slip there. The rebels used to always win without those clarifications. Now the Empire has much more tools available to them to make it a much more close and balanced game. And the cool thing, interesting about this is, I already knew I liked this game a lot. But I've been able to see now, after playing it several times, that there is a real strong tactical sort of strategic element to this game where you can kind of feel like, okay, this is the best thing for the rebels to do, is to rush the seal generator. And the best thing for the Empire to do is surround the Death Star with a bunch of TIE fighters and, just sort of build up a wall of that. So even if the rebels get the shield, not a big deal, because you just got TIE fighters after wave after TIE fighters. Now, once you know that, you can kind of take steps to combat each of those strategies depending on who you are. And you can just go, okay, I'm going to go against that. I'm going to go start going right after the TIE fighters and build up my own wall with the X-Wings and stuff and ignore Endor altogether. I'll get Endor. Endor's coming. It's going to come to me. So you have that sort of metagame within you and whoever you play with. I didn't expect that to even be there. I just knew it was a fun 30-minute Ameritrash filler game, which there are like none of. There's like never any good Ameritrash filler games. They're always big and long. This one fits like so many different levels. It's quick, it's Star Wars, it's Return of the Jedi, and it has sort of a little bit extra layer of depth. I don't want to oversell it, but there's an extra layer of depth here for this 30-minute game. You can't go wrong with it. I got the Black Series Edition. If you can afford it, get that one. But if you can't, spend the $19 or whatever if the other one goes on sale. Easy $19 spend. Easy. Okay. Number 1 is Blood Rage. Now this is one that I could throw in Euro and I could throw it in Ameritrash. And to me, it falls on the Ameritrash side because it is way combative. It's very in your face. It's very aggressive. It feels very muscular in a way. It's very testosterone filled because it's just big, disgustingly bulky figures all over the place. Vikings, just blood and guts everywhere. And so to me, it just pushes it over into the Ameritrash side. Whereas, what did I mention? The Argent, the Consortium, kind of falls more on the Euro side because it's not really in your face Argent. This one is in your face. I mean, it's just area control. You got this cool card drafting element. If you haven't heard of Blood Rage, I'm sure everybody's been talking about it. I know it's on, I think, a lot of end of year best of game lists. This has a lot of elements that just really speak to me, and you can play it in a decent amount of time, about 90 minutes. And the card drafting, which I love. The area control is really cool, very interesting. And the way the card drafting sort of plays and interplays with that. And sometimes you want to lose combat, sometimes you want to win combat. There's different cool abilities that you can do and different ways to score points. You can kind of wait and strike at different opportunities based on, what players are doing, what you think they're doing, what you think they might be doing because of what you drafted. Lots of cool stuff. Just definitely take a look at this one. I don't think I really need to talk about this one too much because I've already kind of talked it to death and a lot of other people have, but Blood Rage is definitely my number one Ameritrash game. So, are you still with me? So we're going to go do my social games and then my number one game, which is on none of these different categories, but it's definitely my number one game. So I'm going to be a little bit quicker here with my social games. Number 7 is Terra. Oh, and then the reason, why I'm leaving social for last is because there are so many social games. I love that though. Now, we might be getting close to kind of social deduction burnout. A lot of people talk about Cult of the New, or like the BGG Cult of the Euro. I think there's like some kind of cult of the social Anyway, there's a little bit of that's happening, I think. And I think that's okay. I think it's a good thing. Definitely need balance to the force, right? But there's a lot of social games coming out. Like, how many do we need? Okay. And I have left a couple off of here. And I kind of was swapping some back and forth on this because I'm like, I could put that one on there. But I'm like, I like this one a little bit better, but it's slightly different, but kind of the same as this other one. So let's just jump in now. Number 7 is Terra. Now, this is one that could be a Euro, it could be social, but I really just wanted to mention Terra because I really have enjoyed this game. It's based on the engine of Fauna, and it's sort of like a Trivial Pursuit Wits and Wagers Euro game with cube it's kind of area control because what you do is you get a question and you have areas on a map and on different tracks and you try to get on the right answer and then place adjacent to what you think the right answer might be. You might think that Billy across the table knew the answer, so you place adjacent to him even though he maybe got there first, or you're not really sure what the answer was. And there's just massive amounts of cards. Played as the gamer group, with the family. Everybody's really enjoyed it. It's a nice, good half an hour or so game, and you can play it back to back to back. A lot of fun. You're going to have a ton of replayability, and it's a very social game. So a lot of these are going to be social deduction games, but I think there's probably a untapped and underrealized area of just social games. Okay, quick rant. All games are social. The end. Okay, and next is the Grizzled, number 6. Now it's a card game, but I found this very social, very interesting sort of mentally. And this is where I kind of get with this social ideas is you need to really get in this sort of Hanabi-esque aspect. And I kind of early on in my first few plays of this was like, this feels like Hanabi, but then I kind of backed off because it's not reminiscent mechanically, but having played this now with different groups a lot over the last year, getting very into the dynamics and sort of the tells that you can have with the game. So you have the speeches that you can give out, the tells. You have just the card play in general. You have a little bit of the card counting that can go on. So it's hard for me to explain this and sort of tangibly talk about it. You've got to play the game several times. But it's very interesting in terms of the theme of it. The theme, I will say, honestly, has gone by the wayside, whereas it has become more about playing cards smartly, reading my fellow teammates, and getting around the different obstacles that present itself. But the theme of being in a trench in World War really works well with this style of game. And it's very difficult to win, especially when you play with sort of all the rules turned on. There's been a couple editions of the rules, and you can play with different variants. I have actually beat it finally, with all of the rules turned on. The speeches only work for your other players, not yourself, and using the trap cards and all that stuff. And holy cow, was it satisfying to win. And that's like, you remember that, and it's hard to like just move on from that in a lot of ways, because like, we won it, we did it, and it's super satisfying. And this is one I would definitely play with a same group a lot, because you're going to get into how people like to play, what their kind of tendencies are. It's very elusive to try to pin this one down, but I really enjoy this a lot. Number 5 is Spyfall. This is one, if you would have talked to me earlier in the year, I would say this would be my number one, maybe my number one game of the year, or at least very close to that. It has kind of fallen flat a couple of times, and I think it takes a very specific group that's willing to do this and willing to kind of get past basically being the spy. Being the spy is very difficult, and it's hard to kind of be off on your own and be like the only traitor without being able to be quiet and just sort of let things play out. Because you can be asked questions in this game very, very early in a round, and you're like, well, I'm not ready to answer yet. I don't really figured out what's going on. And so that's really, really tricky, but I like that. It's such a different experience. It's probably the game I would least recommend to people, now that I've played it with several groups, to people to play. Because you're going to have those experiences, I think, fall flat. But to me, the good sides, the good experiences outweigh that. I think it's worth it to keep investing time in playing it. I have really enjoyed it, and it's definitely a unique experience. If you haven't looked at Spyfall, I did a review. There's been other reviews. Go check it out. It's a really, really interesting, fun experience. Number 4, Codenames. Maybe people would expect this to be number 1. I've played this several times now, way more times than I can count. It's awesome. It's great. The thing that it has going for it is it's so accessible. Now, to me, the 3 above this are better, more enjoyable, more satisfying games. And I would argue that a good game of Spyfall for me will be more satisfying than a good game of Codenames. But like I said, I've had enough sort of flat games of Spyfall that Codenames has to come up. I don't think I've ever had a flat game of Codenames. It's always been a good, fun experience. A little bit samey after a while, though, I gotta say. I feel like you're like, boy, I thought you were going to talk good about this game, but I feel like I should just sort of temper a little bit, because recently just people with codenames all the time. They get kind of samey. It's like, okay, rabbit 3, and then you pick the word and then you go. And it's like, okay, well, it kind of gets the same after a while. Like if you play it, and I maybe have just burnt out on it, I'm not going to get rid of it. It's going to be one of those easy games. It's just because everybody has a smile on their face once you start playing the game. And so in terms of me like ranking games, that's very difficult for me, but this one is easy to play. It's just buttery, and it's just sort of an ingenious, simple, straightforward piece of game that I just can't not recommend, because it's so smooth and buttery and works well for like every imaginable player count. You could have like a 20 versus 20 game. Well, that's ridiculous, but you could do something like that. You could break it out into 2 groups of 5 versus 5 and just easily play on 2 different sides of the room. And it's just so easy and relaxing to get into. That's number 4. Enough about Codenames. And number 3 is Deception in Hong Kong, another new game. And this one is why, well, let me back up. This to me fits in that same area of Codenames, of Spyfall, of Mysterium, of, like the Resistance, and sort of One Night. Now, One Night's like off in its own funky world. This is such an interesting game. I did a review of it a couple of weeks ago and had a chance to play it even more since then, and it just impresses me the way this game works out. Now, you're going to have some amazing games of this. And you're going to have where, you figure out the murderer guesses the witness. I don't want to get too into the details here, but you're also going to have some games that feel like they're going to fall flat. But what my experience has gone and told me is the game is difficult in a way, and it is designed to be difficult because you have to make that sort of free association jump as you're giving clues as the forensic scientist, or you're trying to read the forensic scientist, as the forensic scientist is sort of responding to, the discussion. It just gets into that sort of next dimension of game for me where everything comes together and you're so satisfied with figuring it out, where even the murderer is like, hey, you guys figured it out. You got me, and it just gets to that next level, which is super, super fun and very satisfying. And you're going to find out with these top 3 here. It's all to me about that. There's a difficulty there. There's a kind of a growth within the group of people playing the game. Then you're very satisfied about unlocking or getting close to unlocking. Even if you don't actually win or necessarily accomplish the goal, you get very close and you feel like you made good progress as a team, as a group. And that's what really comes across to me with Deception in Hong Kong. And I'm really excited to play this again, actually, just talking about it. So definitely take a look at that one. Number 2, another satisfying, and this is probably the most... the game that most associates with this whole concept of being satisfied as a team, and that's Bomb Squad. This game has a ton in it. And it's funny because now I'm thinking about it, David Short is one of the designers of Bomb Squad. He also designed automobiles, which I talked about. And I like this because it's Hanabi, and it has this thing where you have so much game built in, and that's the same thing with automobiles. I don't know, maybe that's something that he has, but because you can play like the basic intro scenario and do it. And you get into the game, that's a pretty cute game, But then you can play, like, the one we played most recent was I think it was level 3. We played on like the elite mode, and we just went for it. And we played it, I think 3 times, maybe 4, but I think it was the 3rd time we got it. And no, I think it was 4. I can't remember. And we won. And we were loud. We loved it. And there was a 4-player game, and it was super difficult. And one time we got so close, I think it was the 3rd time, we got so close, and we didn't make it. We're super frustrated. We're like, we got to do it again. And then in that 4th game, everything was against us. We're like, we're not even going to defuse one bomb. But again, kind of back to that whole Grizzled attitude of you get to know your players, you get to know the tendencies and what they're going to forget, because this is one of those where you can't look at the cards and you're like, there's 2 blues there, he's going to forget that, and then you get into that, you get into that collective sort of thing, the teamwork idea of it. And then you win, and it's great, and it's satisfying. And there's so many different modes and things and different scenarios and missions you can play with this, built upon this core, that there's just so much game here that you can just explore and have fun with and try again and again and again and again. You're going to get your money's worth out of this game, is what I'm really trying to say here, is you got to give a look at this. Now it's a real time. It's stressful as anything you can imagine. So if you don't want the real time stuff, then there you go. But this is really going to excel and hit that. If you have a group of people that you can be frustrated with, you can be relaxed with, and everybody's going to be okay with it, and you can be stressed out together, and then that's okay, and then you can win, and everybody will be super happy. That's Bomb Squad number 2. Number 1 is Dark Moon, and this remains, if you've watched my top 100, my second favorite sort of social deduction game behind One Night Ultimate Werewolf. Really interesting game. Very hard to explain why I like it so much. It's kind of Battlestar Galactica with dice, and has a cool theme. It's more like The Thing on a moon around Jupiter, instead of The Thing in Antarctica. And it has some different Battlestar types of things. It was originally based on BSG Express. But it's got this whole Liar's Dice thing where you roll some dice that are hidden. And you're like, oh, I only rolled the -4, so too bad. And everybody's like, well, you're the traitor. And I'm like, no, it's just what I rolled. And then just from the instant that you start the game, you have to be on your toes watching people. And it's got all these cool thematic things where you're trying to succeed at different objectives and then fix different stations that are around the space station that's on this moon. And trying to fight back this infected person that is trying to sabotage everything. And it plays in about an hour. You can have a quicker game. Well, yeah, you can have sometimes a super quick game that takes 30 minutes. I would say that's more of an anomaly, but to me, it feels like a bigger, heavier, chunkier game like Battlestar or Dead of Winter or something like that, but still plays on the lighter, more reasonable side. So they've been able to sort of condense all of that and reduce it, but still maintain that feel of like, oh, I played a full game, I didn't play a filler. Whereas maybe you played it in a little bit more than the amount of time it took to play a filler. So I really like that, because some of these other games, like this, for example, Deception in Hong Kong is one that is in the same sort of thing where you have like a traitor or a murderer kind of thing. But a game round is going to take you 20 minutes. So you can play it a couple of times. This one feels like it does not ever feel like it's overstaying its welcome whatsoever. And so I still feel like I got my full game meal, so to speak, out of it. And I love everything about the game. So anyway, those are my, 21 games plus some honorable mentions. And the number one game is Pandemic Legacy, no surprise. Now, I did 2 reviews on this one, spoiler free and a complete spoiler one. And so I'm at the point where it's very difficult for me to sort of explain why it's the number one game, because I think went over that in my spoiler review. Now, I really was drawn in by this game in terms of the story element. That's just really hard without spoiling. I would recommend, here's the thing. I think this is great. I think board games could do this. I hate to do this, but I'm going to contrast it with Time Stories. To me, this is a game where Time Stories, like I said in another video, is more like a choose your own adventure and less of a game. Still some game stuff, but not really. This is a game. This is a game. Now, it's easy, maybe, because it was based on Pandemic, which is already a good co-op, right? A very solid core that many expansions have been wrapped around, and they wrapped some story and some more different modules around it. So it works perfect. It works perfectly for me. I think it's also like unlocked, for at least in my mind and my hope and my imagination for the future, what's possible with this. Now, and people can go back and forth and gripe about the legacy and you're destroying your game. One thing I said in my review, which I think is now wrong, is you can go back and play the game once you're done. What you have is your own custom copy of Pandemic. I have gone back and played it. I've had a great time with it. Now, I don't alter the game anymore, but there's a couple of threads on Board Game Geek. Don't go look at them unless you finish the game, because there are spoilers in there. But there are some rules that people have come up with, some great rules, about how you can just play the game once you're done with all 12 months of the game. And you can use some of the characters you have and some of the different things that have happened to your board. You can just use them. So you have, basically, at the end of the day, a copy of Pandemic that is custom to you. Now, I wish that the designers or the publisher would sort of ratify or issue maybe a little set of rules or suggestions, types of things for people to do it, because it doesn't really matter. But it'd be kind of cool if they did that, just kind of made it official and said like, oh, well, yeah, if you did this, then this can happen, blah, blah, blah. So I think the argument or whatever is that you can't play it after you're done is wrong. It's just not the truth. Even if that was the case, I would still be okay with this, like setting this on fire and never playing it again, because it's such a different experience for me in terms of the narrative that went through the game, which I did not expect really to happen. You're still kind of playing Pandemic and then all these other add-ons, but there is a narrative that goes through all the games, and the choices that you make in the game, yeah, they alter things, but they also are altering this world. And maybe I'm smitten because I never played Risk Legacy, but that might be part of it. But they alter the world in ways that matter to the story. Now, you have a definite path from beginning to end. You're always going to kind of end the same way-ish. It's not like you're going to, I don't know. You could kind of argue semantics with this. I mean, the story kind of deviates a little bit, but you're a little bit on rails and stuff, but the way you end it. But in the meantime, you're playing an actual fun game, and it's kind of sweating your choices anyway. But yeah, it's really hard not. I hate these reviews where I can't spoil because I'm like, oh, this part's cool, but that's a spoiler. Oh, that's such a weird place to be in for board games. You know, it's such a weird thing. Okay, so anyway, I'm giving away a copy of this. So if you're against the legacy thing and you're against spending your money in altering a game physically, you have no excuse. I'm going to be giving a copy away to one of you. You know, so it's yours. It's my money. It's on me. One of you will get it, and you can play through it, and hopefully you enjoy it. And then you can forget about it, and you just throw that off your shoulders about this whole thing of a boxed linear game that you can never play again once you're done, which is false because you can keep playing it. So I'm very apologetic about sort of my just wishy-washy abstract thoughts here because, like I said, you kind of have to spoil it because there's certain moments in the game that are just like, oh wow, that's cool, that's awesome, oh wow, that's neat, oh that's cool, when that happened, okay, this happened. And it also just broadened my horizons for what's possible in this kind of style of game, the approach to games. I mean, they really don't have to do the legacy stuff. They could base it on an app, and the app would track your progress, and different things would happen. Maybe you'll alter your board a little bit or something, or you could just have some cards out. But there is something cool about the experience of, like, you know, tearing up cards and stickering things. So that's fine. But yeah, I definitely recommend this. This is, I don't know where it would be, you know, in my top 100 games. And that's a tricky thing because, yes, I might play it again here and there as sort of my own custom copy of Pandemic, but I'm not really playing the game as designed or as intended, or I've already played through the scenario. I'm never going to play through that again. I never will. I will never play through Season 1 again. So yeah, that's it. But hey, that's good. That's a good thing. You know, this is like, people talk about like every 5-8 years there's some big game like Dominion or Settlers of Catan or something that comes and shakes things up. I think 100% it's Pandemic Legacy. I think you're going to see different versions of Legacy. You know, I had a chance to play another one called Chronicles Origins. Very excited about that. There's Seafall coming up. There's some other games with some legacy elements. And I think the thing for me, just kind of sitting here talking, is if anybody's designing a legacy, I think you have to go for it like 100%. I think you have to commit to what you're going to tell the story and how you're going to tell the story and what you want the players to sort of step into in terms of that space, in terms of the game space as well as the mental space, and how you want to sort of affect them. Like, not just from a point of view of what you think of when you think of a board game of them versus other players, and just that whole like paradigm's like whew, it's just going away. I mean, it's obviously going to be there. I mean, I listed 7 amazing Euros and Ameritrash games that are just like, if you break it down, like a lot of other games. But this is a different element here. And it steps into the RPG element, but there's something about having the game sort of dictate to you what's going on, and then using a lot of those modern board game design techniques. Yeah, I don't know. It's a new frontier for me. I think this is just, you're able to do a lot of things, and the thing you should do is you should commit. You should commit to that experience. You should think more about where you're going to put that player, what kind of space they're going to be in, what kind of tough decisions they're going to have to make, what kind of moral decisions they're going to have to make about, you know, the people involved and what they're manipulating and maybe what they feel like they are doing sort of vicariously through the game. I think that's the thing. That's the thing that is most important with this. And so, yeah. Anyway, number 1 game. That's it. Have a good year next year. Thanks.